3 days before they tried to kill me, God showed me exactly what was going to happen. Not through intelligence reports, not through a warning from my security team, and not through a vague feeling of danger. He showed me through a dream. It was not an ordinary dream. It was vivid, detailed, and so unnaturally clear that when I woke up, my body was soaked in sweat and my heart was pounding as if I had just escaped death itself. That dream saved my life. And today, for the first time, I will tell you everything I saw, every detail, every symbol, every warning God placed in my spirit before my enemies could carry out their plan. I am not someone who casually speaks about dreams and visions. I was trained as a soldier. I was trained to trust facts, reports, and concrete information. I was not trained to rely on supernatural experiences, but what happened 3 days before the assassination attempt changed everything I thought I knew about how God protects his servants. My name is Ibrahim Traoré. I am the president of Burkina Faso. But on the night of that dream, I was not a president. I was simply a man asleep in his bed. I had no idea that forces were already in motion to end my life. No idea that meetings had taken place, money had changed hands, and a plan had already been finalized. I knew nothing, except what God chose to reveal. Before I tell you about the dream itself, you need to understand the context. Leadership in Burkina Faso has never been safe. From the moment I accepted this responsibility, I understood that powerful interests would oppose me. I knew that choosing to stand with my people rather than submit to foreign pressure would make me a target. Threats were never rare. Intelligence warnings were constant. Allies quietly advised caution. And there was always the unspoken truth that many people stood to gain from my death. I learned to live with that reality. I made peace with God about my life. I placed my future in his hands and accepted that the length of my days would be decided by him, not by my enemies. But this season was different. In the weeks leading up to the dream, something began to change. I cannot explain it logically. It felt like a heaviness in the air, as if darkness was gathering just beyond my awareness. My prayer life intensified. I began waking up in the middle of the night with an urgent need to pray, not knowing exactly why. I would kneel beside my bed for long stretches of time, unable to put words to what I was feeling, only sensing the Holy Spirit interceding through me. My wife noticed the change. She asked me more than once if something was wrong. I had no clear answer. All I knew was this: something was approaching, and my spirit was preparing for battle long before my mind understood why. Looking back now, I understand. God was preparing me. He was sharpening my spiritual sensitivity. He was tuning my ears to hear what he was about to say, because what he was about to say would save my life. The night of the dream, I went to bed exhausted. It had been a long day filled with meetings, decisions, and the quiet weight that comes with leading a nation under pressure. My body was tired. My mind was crowded with responsibilities I could not escape. As I always do, I prayed before sleeping. I thanked God for carrying me through another day. I asked him to protect my family. I placed the nation into his hands. Then I closed my eyes. The dream began in darkness. I found myself walking through a long corridor made of stone. The walls were ancient, cold, and damp, as if they had stood there for centuries. There were no windows, no doors, no markings to tell me where I was. The only light came from far ahead, a faint glow at the end of the passage. I could hear my footsteps echoing against the floor, each step loud and lonely in the silence. I did not know where I was going, but I felt compelled to keep moving forward, drawn toward that distant light. As I walked, a realization crept into my spirit. I was not alone. Shadows moved along the walls beside me, not clearly visible, not fully formed, but undeniably present. They matched my pace, staying just at the edge of my vision, close enough to sense, far enough to remain hidden. Fear began to rise in my chest. Not ordinary fear, but the kind that grips you in nightmares. The kind that tightens your throat, steals your breath, and makes your limbs feel heavy and slow. I knew with absolute certainty that these shadows meant harm. They were not observers. They were hunters. And yet, at the same time, I felt something else. At my right side, there was warmth, a presence. Someone was walking with me through that corridor, I could not see him, but I felt him as clearly as I felt the fear, calm, steady, protective. The corridor opened suddenly into a large room. In the center of the room stood a table. Around it sat several figures. Their faces were hidden in darkness, but their hands were clearly visible, resting on the surface of the table. They were leaning forward, pointing, gesturing, speaking with quiet intensity. On the table lay a map, and on that map there was a red mark. I did not need anyone to explain it to me. I knew the red mark represented me. These men were planning something. Their voices were muffled as if I were hearing them through water, but their intent was unmistakable. Every movement, every gesture carried purpose. They wanted me dead. I tried to step closer. I wanted to hear their words, to see their faces, to understand exactly what they were planning. But my feet would not move. I was frozen in place, forced to watch, without the ability to intervene. Then one of the figures looked up. His face remained hidden in shadow, but I felt his eyes meet mine. He knew I was there, and he smiled. It was not the smile of a man. It was cold, calculated, empty of humanity. In that moment, I understood that this was not imagination. This was a revelation. And before I could react, before I could speak or run, I woke up, gasping for air. I woke up choking for breath. The room was dark and silent. My wife was sleeping peacefully beside me, unaware that my body was shaking and my heart was racing as if it were trying to escape my chest. Everything around me looked normal, but nothing inside me was. My clothes were soaked with sweat. My hands were trembling. I sat up slowly and looked at the clock on the bedside table. 3:00 a.m. The hour when sleep feels thin. The hour when silence feels heavy. The hour when the line between the spiritual and the physical seems almost transparent. I knew immediately that I would not fall asleep again. I slipped quietly out of bed and walked to the small room I use for prayer. I closed the door behind me and knelt on the floor. I did not speak. I did not ask questions. I simply waited. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Time loses meaning in moments like that. The only thing I was aware of was the presence of God and the weight of what I had just seen. Slowly, gently, understanding began to form in my spirit. The dream was a warning, not a vague sense of danger, not a symbolic message meant for some distant future. It was specific, it was real, and it was imminent. The corridor was a path I was about to walk, a sequence of events already set in motion. The shadows were not imaginary fears. They were the unseen forces working behind human decisions, fueling hatred, ambition, and violence. The room with the table was not symbolic, it was real. The men around that table were real people. The plan they were discussing was already in progress, and the red mark on the map was not metaphor, it was me. Then, my attention returned to the detail I had almost overlooked, the warmth at my right side, the presence that walked with me through the darkness without speaking, without revealing himself, but never leaving. I understood then that the dream was not only a warning of danger, it was also a promise. Danger was coming, but I would not face it alone. If I stayed alert, if I listened, if I obeyed. I remained on my knees until dawn, praying quietly, preparing my spirit for what lay ahead, even though I did not yet know exactly what that would be. When the sun rose, I stood up with a strange clarity. I did not have all the answers, but I knew one thing with certainty. Something was about to happen, and God had given me time to respond. That day passed under a quiet tension. Outwardly, everything appeared normal. Meetings continued, conversations followed their usual rhythm, decisions were made. But inside me, something remained unsettled, as if my spirit were waiting for confirmation. I prayed throughout the day, not with panic, not with fear, but with focus. I asked God for clarity, for guidance that would be unmistakable, for direction I could not misunderstand. That night, I went to sleep again, and God spoke once more. This dream was different. There was no long corridor, no shadows along the walls, no hidden figures around a table. It was simple. I saw myself inside a vehicle, traveling along a road. The landscape was familiar, instantly recognizable. It was the exact route I was scheduled to take in 3 days for a regional meeting. The road stretched forward, calm and ordinary. Then it split. 2 paths diverged. The left path followed the original plan, the route my security team had already approved. the route everyone expected me to take. The right path turned away, longer and less direct. In the dream, without hesitation, my vehicle continued onto the left path, and the moment it did, I felt it. The same cold fear from the first dream, the same heaviness, the same sense of danger pressing in from all sides. The shadows were there again, waiting. I stopped. The vehicle slowed, then turned. I chose the right path instead. As soon as I did, everything changed. The fear lifted, the heaviness disappeared, and once again, I felt that warmth at my right side. The same presence from the first dream, steady and protective. I woke up knowing exactly what God was telling me. The left path was death. The right path was life. Something would happen on that planned route in 3 days. Something I needed to avoid. When morning came, I did not hesitate. I did not debate the meaning of the dream. I did not try to explain it away with logic. And I did not ask for more signs. I already knew what I had to do. I called my head of security into my office. I did not tell him about the dreams. I did not speak about visions or spiritual warnings. I simply instructed him to increase vigilance and to review all security protocols for the coming days. He listened carefully, then asked a direct question. Do we have specific intelligence about a threat? I looked at him and answered honestly. I have received information I trust completely. I offered no further explanation. He accepted my words and went to work. Later that day, I reviewed my schedule. I studied every movement, every journey, every public appearance. I was searching for something, a moment of exposure, a point of vulnerability. I found it. 3 days from the night of the first dream, I was scheduled to travel to a regional meeting. The route had been cleared of terrorist activity, but it passed through an area that was never entirely secure. Each time I looked at that journey on the schedule, I felt the same unease I had felt in the dreams. I prayed again, and the answer was the same. The next morning, I made a decision my advisors did not understand. I changed the route. I informed my security team that we would approach the meeting from a different direction, a longer route, less familiar, and not part of the original plan. Questions followed immediately. The planned route was already secured, arrangements had been finalized. Changing now would complicate coordination. I listened. Then I ended the discussion. The decision was final. Some of them thought I was being overly cautious. Others assumed I was reacting to intelligence they had not been briefed on. None of them knew the truth. All they knew was that I had chosen a different path. The third day arrived quietly. I woke up before dawn with an unusual sense of calm. There was no fear in my chest, no anxiety in my thoughts, only a steady awareness that this was the day God had been preparing me for. I knew something was going to happen, and I also knew I had obeyed. Before leaving, I spent extra time in prayer. I thanked God for the warnings He had given me and asked for continued protection throughout the journey ahead. I committed every mile of the road into His hands. Then I kissed my wife goodbye and held my children a little longer than usual, not because I was afraid, but because I was grateful. The convoy departed as planned, following the new route. The terrain was different. The villages were unfamiliar. The road was longer and less predictable, but my spirit remained at peace. My advisors were still puzzled by the change. Some of them exchanged quiet looks. A few seemed convinced I was being overly cautious, but no one questioned the orders. The journey passed without incident. We arrived at the regional meeting safely. The discussions were productive. Decisions were made. The responsibilities of leadership continued as they always do. By the time we returned to the capital that evening, the day felt almost ordinary. Almost. I remember thinking, for a brief moment, that perhaps nothing had happened after all. That perhaps the danger had passed unseen, or never existed in the first place. That thought did not last long. As night fell, my intelligence chief requested an urgent meeting. The look on his face told me everything before he spoke. He closed the door behind him and placed a folder on my desk. His hands were steady, but his face was not. There was an incident today, he said quietly. An ambush. On the original route. At a location we would have reached at almost the exact time our convoy was scheduled to pass. Armed men had positioned themselves along the road. Explosives had been planted at a narrow curve where vehicles would naturally slow down. A kill zone had been carefully prepared, with overlapping fields of fire designed to leave no chance of escape. They waited. For hours. But the convoy never came. When it became clear that my route had changed, the attackers attempted to flee. They did not disappear quickly enough. Security forces in the area noticed suspicious movement and initiated a pursuit. Several men were captured. During interrogation, they confirmed everything. They had been paid to kill me. The plan had been organized weeks in advance. Funding had come from outside the country. The location had been chosen with precision. The timing had been calculated using my publicly known schedule. They had done everything correctly. Everything. Except one thing. They had not accounted for God. As I read through the report, a cold realization settled over me. I saw the maps. I saw the coordinates. I saw the timeline. And I understood just how close I had come to death. Then my intelligence chief spoke again. "There is something else," he said. They had identified the leader of the plot. I had never met him. I did not recognize his name, but as the description of his demeanor was read aloud, his cold calculation, his lack of conscience, the way others deferred to him, I felt a chill run through my body. I had seen him before, not his face, but his presence. He was the man at the table, the one who had looked up at me in the dream, the one who had smiled. I asked to be alone. When the door closed behind me, the weight of everything I had just learned finally settled in. The distance between life and death, measured now in hours, in kilometers, in a single decision, became painfully clear. I went to my prayer room, and I wept. Not tears of fear, not tears of shock, tears of gratitude. God had seen what I could not see. He had known what I could not know. He had spoken when no human voice could have warned me. I knelt there for a long time, saying very little, because words felt insufficient. I thanked him again and again, not just for saving my life, but for his faithfulness, his patience, and his willingness to guide me when I was listening. In the days that followed, the investigation continued. More names were revealed. More connections were uncovered. The network behind the plot slowly unraveled. But my focus was no longer on them. My focus was on what had changed inside me. Before this experience, I believed in prayer. I believed that God hears us. I believed that he cares about our lives. But belief is different from knowing. Now I knew. I knew that God speaks. I knew that he warns. I knew that he intervenes. Not always loudly, not always publicly, but precisely, personally, and at exactly the right time. This experience reshaped my relationship with him. I became more attentive, more deliberate, more willing to listen, especially in moments of stillness. I learned something else as well. The dream itself was not enough. If I had ignored it, if I had dismissed it as stress or imagination, if I had chosen convenience over obedience, I would not be here today. The warning saved my life, but obedience made it effective. I want to speak now to those of you who are listening and wondering what this story has to do with your own life. You may not be a president, you may not face armed men or assassination plots, but danger does not always announce itself with weapons. Sometimes it comes quietly, through financial collapse, a sudden illness, a relationship breaking apart, or a decision that seems small but carries irreversible consequences. God sees those dangers just as clearly as he saw mine. He knows what is forming long before it reaches you. He understands what is being planned even when you do not. And he is willing to warn you if you are willing to listen. The question is not whether God still speaks. The question is whether you are paying attention. Are you creating space in your life for silence, for prayer, for reflection? Are you quiet enough to notice when something feels wrong, when a warning rises in your spirit without logical explanation? Or are you so busy, so distracted, so overwhelmed by noise that his whispers cannot reach you? I almost missed that warning. I was exhausted the night of the first dream. I could have slept through it. I could have woken up with nothing more than a vague sense of unease and dismissed it as stress. But God had prepared me. Those weeks of intense prayer, those nights of waking with urgency, that growing sense that something was approaching, none of it was accidental. If you want to hear God's guidance, you must prepare yourself to hear, not by becoming extraordinary, but by becoming attentive. This is not about having special gifts or mystical abilities. It is about relationship. The more time you spend with God, the more familiar his voice becomes. The more you seek him, the more clearly his guidance stands out from fear, imagination, or impulse. I am not a prophet. I am not a theologian. I am simply a man who learned to listen and lived because he did.